everyone, welcome to the 408th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a lot to talk about this week. We're going to be talking about, the brand new HomePod. We're also going to be talking about an update from The Verge on the Eufy/Anker security camera debacle. We'll get some real answers. I'm going to tell you about some semiconductor earnings and what that might indicate for the IoT. We've got a new retail theft prevention that looks kind of interesting. And related to that, we're going to talk about putting tech in retail stores and what that means for broadband. The EU has a new $100 million venture capital fund for IoT. And we've got some small product updates from Schlage and Ecobee/Generac. We're also going to talk about decibel sensing and a review from Kevin about a new Matter smart home plug. We're also going to hear from Kevin Fu, who is a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Northeastern University. You also may be familiar with him because he was recently the FDA's first acting director of medical device cybersecurity. And we are going to be talking about, medical device cybersecurity, hacking sensors, and how parts of the Patch Act made its way into the omnibus bill. So we're going to have some medical device security as part of legislation coming soon. All of this and more awaits you. And now, let's get started with the show. Kevin, there is a new Apple HomePod that we talked about, I think it was last week or the week before. We knew it was coming. The reviews are out. It is shipping as of the day this podcast comes out, February 2nd. We did not review this yet because we are not a fancy bigwig tech publication. I know. Y'all are shocked, right? Us too.
Apple may not think so. It's probably the more accurate thing to say.
That's fine. I mean, we're fancy. We're not big. I'm confident admitting that.
Well, they send us the Apple TVs, so I don't know why we don't get HomePods, but that's okay, because we'll either get one eventually on our own, or we will do what everybody else did and look at all the reviews that just came out.
Yes. So this is the $299 HomePod. It's the big, good sounding speaker, and it is kind of the fanciest smart speaker. It's also going to act as a hub in your Matter smart home. So yay. So Kevin, why don't you have the $99 HomePod minis. Yay.
Right, I do. I have the $99 HomePod minis, and I did review the original HomePod, which started out at $349, and eventually the price dropped to $299 before it was discontinued in 2021. So what's different? What brought this back? I don't know, because
I think it was Matter.
It may be. Listen, it is different. The HomePod 2 it's got a slightly different shape to it. You'd be hard pressed to tell by looking at it, but it's a little shorter. It's a little different in weight. It has a bigger display on it, or I should say the display features take up the whole display, so there's no bezel there. It has a removable power cord now. Okay. It has a Thread radio in it now for Matter support. Okay. It has new features such as listening for smoke detectors or alarm systems, etc. And it can send a push notification to you in that case. Okay. And it's got a temperature and humidity sensor built in. But does all that make up for the price based on the reviews? And I'm not surprised to read these reviews saying probably not. None of those are reasons to me why somebody didn't buy it around the first time for $299, right?
$349.
Well, it didn't stay $349 all that long.
Okay, that's true. They did drop the price.
They dropped it pretty quick because it wasn't selling. And even afterwards, it obviously wasn't selling because they discontinued it. I just don't see, even if you add all those new changes up together, is that a reason to go buy it now? Were you held back from buying it before because it didn't have those? I'm sure some people will say yes, and that's fine. Most people, I don't think so. I mean, if it wasn't clear when we first talked about this device 2 weeks ago, I wasn't that jazzed about it. And I'm a HomeKit person. We all have iOS devices. I use Apple Music. But do I need to pay $300 for that kind of sound quality? Because that's really what it is. That's what it's all about to me. I don't need to pay that. I can get all those same features that we just talked about, except for the removable power cord from the $99 HomePod Mini.
And people did like the sound. A note, you can't actually pair the new HomePod with your existing minis, just so you know.
Okay. I know you can't pair the old HomePod, the old big one, with the new big one for like stereo speakers. So I couldn't even do that with the current HomePods that I have, is what you're saying, which again, I don't care personally.
Yeah. It does have Matter. Your smaller one does also. So
correct. It has a Thread radio. I mean, they could have done Matter over Wi-Fi without putting the Thread radio in, but I'm glad to see that it's there.
Yeah,
honestly.
Thread is just nice. It's very fast.
I agree.
It's a nice. All right. So basically, I don't know what to say.
It just doesn't move the needle forward enough for me at that price. Again, there are people who have the disposable income that say, I don't care if it's $299. I'm going to get 2 of them. It's going to be my stereo, spatial audio, surround sound for my Apple TV. And I'm not saying that's a bad decision. It's just, I don't think a lot of people are in that boat right there.
Gotcha. All right. So, Now, this will come up actually when we talk about our IoT podcast hotline call this week. But The Verge, let's just give a big shout out to The Verge because they have been very active on this Eufy Anker. So the Anker makes the Eufy brand of smart home devices, and they've been very active with this Eufy security camera hack story and really pressing Anker about what is going on, because Anker has not initially. Anker responded to reports. There was a hacker who was like, hey, you guys say that you don't put my doorbell camera images or my camera images up in the cloud, but you do. And then they also noticed that they weren't encrypted. You could actually just log in remotely and see camera feed videos. And that was like, no, that's not cool.
And it was other people's camera feeds. That was the issue there.
You did have to have login information, but you could get some of that if they didn't change their password and you had the serial number. It was not, it was not great. So Anker was like, no, that's not true. And they were like, no, it is. And then it was like, okay, let's change our privacy notice, but not answer the questions. And then apparently they just kept ignoring emails. And finally, The Verge was like, you know what? We're going to print. We're going to say everything that you've told us. And they said, okay, we'll talk now. And so basically they said, all right, you can actually view live streams. You have to log into the secure panel. You can enter debug mode and then use the web browser's dev tool to locate the live stream and share that with people.
That was part of the issue. It seemed like it was an internal debugging way to access things, but like any hack, it could just be information. And once that information got out, people could use it to view other people's live stream cameras. So this isn't something that most people would do. And Eufy tried to say that.
They did it in a very gaslighty way.
Yes, they said less than 0.01% of our active users use the live streaming feature on the web portal. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that it was available and open in a sense.
So now they've taken that down. They prohibit users from entering debug mode, and the code has now been obfuscated. I can never say that. They also note that their video stream content is now encrypted, so you can't even play it on third-party media players, which is what the hacker actually did. So all of the videos shared between the user's device to the Eufy security web portal or the Eufy security app use end-to-end encryption. So that's great, because that's really what we want to see in the first place for anything that says that they're secure.
And it's kind of what Eufy was implying that they were already doing. So, yeah.
So they talked about their video doorbell because that was one of the things that the hacker was using. They said that they sent and stored an image to the user over their secure cloud, and people were upset about that because the video doorbell said it only had local storage. We actually have that video doorbell, and we bought it because of the local storage. So basically, they're saying they use it to let the facial recognition software run its algorithm, to give it a baseline. So they're like, hey, here's this. Now run your inference. That inference is done locally, but that setup image was stored so they could pull that image if you changed your doorbell, so you don't have to take a new image. But people were not aware of that. Again, I think this is not some of it's a transparency issue. Like, yeah, you should not have the debugging tool. And if you do, you do need to have that be clear to let people access cameras over the internet when you don't really tell people about that feature. So you need to clarify those things. But a lot of this is also just people don't understand how tech works. And there's only so far transparency can go when you're trying to convey to someone who doesn't understand how tech works. So this kind of reminds me of the big furor over everybody's voice utterances or some voice utterances getting sent to QA, right? And I do think that people need to be aware of that, like made aware of that, but it's also really complicated. Like how much of that do you share? How do you explain that? I think the opt-out feature was essential that happened. I think that people should be upfront about that, or manufacturers should be upfront about that. But I do appreciate that's a lot of information to try to share with a user who just wants a video doorbell, right?
Totally agree. And I don't want to give Eufy too much credit here because really they got caught red-handed. However, I will say that they understand, at least now they do, or now they're communicating that they understand that all of their different processes, the tech processes, would not be understood by consumers, most consumers. And they say, look, a lot of these do require the use of the cloud, things like account setup, push notifications, device setup, etc. So they say they will be launching a microsite soon with infographics to better explain all the key processes which are done locally and which require the use of the cloud. To me, that should already be a thing, but at least they're going to do that.
Yeah. And I would also say this is why we should have reporting on these issues and forcing companies to recognize these issues. Because I think a lot of this might have happened, but I don't think it would have happened without the pushback from The Verge. So
I would agree. Yep.
I think that's good. Eufy is committing to doing regular pen testing. They may or may not launch a bug bounty program. I don't know if you've been listening to the podcast for a while. Kevin and I have often talked to people when they're like, how do I buy the most secure device for my home? We tell people, look, security is a process. So we tell people to look up the vendors to see how they behave when a bug happens or a vulnerability is disclosed. Eufy didn't behave well. We also say a good cheat is like, hey, do they have a bug bounty program? Do they use end-to-end encryption? Eufy doesn't tick all these boxes. So originally, this probably would not have been something we recommended if you were like super focused on security. Now it looks like some of those things are there. If you're really focused on security, I still don't know. I wouldn't recommend Anker Eufy. If this is a big deal, this level of trust is a big deal.
Two things come to mind. One, it definitely hurt their brand, long-term sense, I think. I like certain Anker products, but I don't use any Eufy products. I probably never will at this point, never. And the reason being, there are good, transparent, and secure devices that I can get that I feel comfortable with those companies.
Do they have local storage and are relatively inexpensive? Because that's
what people want. And I understand that. I think security is a feature, so you are paying for it.
Yeah.
The same with local processing. You are paying for it because they need certain chip and so on in the devices. It's going to cost more to do that. So I'm happy with the devices that I have in my house. Eufy is not one of them. I just never got around to really trying, I don't think, a Eufy in it. But again, I don't think I will. So my second point is, how do you feel right now as having that video doorbell?
I feel okay because it's a video doorbell. My particular risk model when I assess how I feel about smart devices inside my home, things that face inside the home and have cameras and microphones have a much higher bar. So inside the home, no way. Facing outside my home, I am okay with it. Even though, if you wanted to, originally you could have streamed like me walking my dog at like 6 a.m, I guess. But, I am walking out on a public street, so I'm pretty okay with that.
Right. I think that's a good rule of thumb there for most people. It should definitely have a higher bar when it comes to privacy and security for things in the home, looking inward or listening inward, as opposed to outward.
And some of this was the image stored in the cloud was just for the doorbell, but the other camera stuff was all of their cameras. So people do run those inside. This is, again, why I don't have cameras inside my home, period. It's just not my jam. All right, let's talk about chips. Not tortilla chips, but my favorite kind of chip. Actually, I like tortilla chips, but we'll call semiconductors my favorite chips today. We're in the midst of earnings season, and Intel kicked things off on the chip front with just spectacularly awful earnings. Terrible. But we have some good news on the IoT front. So I wanted to highlight two companies that reported earnings. One is NXP. They do a lot of embedded computing modules. Their quarterly results and annual results for the end of 2022 were kind of mixed. They didn't do what investors had hoped, but they did see in half of NXP's revenue comes from automotive. So that was up. So that was good for them. But I want to point out their industrial and IoT segment, which is what we really care about, was down 15% for the quarter. That IoT segment reported revenue of $605 million. Mobile chip sales were flat, and NXP's communications infrastructure chips, etc., was $494 million. So basically, automotive, yay. And we should see, we're seeing a lot. The chip crisis that had stopped the automotive industry during the pandemic, that is clearly easing. It is apparently still sort of hard to get some chips, as we heard from our guest last week, Matt Rogers. But things are looking up. I also want to point out my other IoT company that did like a bang up job for the year.
Gangbusters.
And the quarter was Silicon Labs. They've been a popular sponsor of the show, but this is not why I'm talking about it. I'm talking about them because, holy moly, Silicon Labs, which reported earnings this morning when we recorded, so that's Wednesday, so it'll be yesterday by the time you hear about it. But on February 1st, they reported their results, and their sales were up 23% year over year to $257.3 million. They're beating Wall Street's estimates. This is great. Part of this is because Silicon Labs has restructured their business to focus only on the IoT. Obviously, also, you'll notice that their annual results were so much smaller than NXP's results. This makes sense. It's a smaller company. But things that are working out in their favor right now is Matter. That becoming real. They've designed and optimized their portfolio to focus on Matter chips. That was taking off last year and will continue to do so. They're just really doing well. So this is a good indication for the IoT. If we call it a macro trend, let's call it a macro trend. I also think it's worth noting that with IoT chips, there are lots of companies who are in this space. We're talking Qualcomm, NXP, Infineon, in a lot of different ways. So there's the embedded, there's companies with sensor businesses as well, there's robotics. Qualcomm would argue that their 5G portfolio is part of this. But for the types of chips that we're mostly talking about are the brains and the radios of IoT. A lot of these are not like super high-end chips. They're power-conserving, cheap chips that you want to stick in devices that will sell for like $100 or so. There are exceptions, obviously, on the industrial side. So we're talking chips with relatively low sales prices, ASPs, average sales price. And so it's going to be really interesting to look at how this plays out in overall profitability and profit margins of these companies, because we're shifting from server chips, computer chips, even mobile phone chips are very high dollar, high value chips. They're not selling as well. Gartner's expecting those devices to continue to drop, sales of those devices. They're still huge, but
yeah, you can get a high-end Intel desktop processor and it can cost you $600, $700, $800, whereas I doubt any of the chips we're talking about cost more than, $20 maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, 20 is high. It depends on what you're looking at it for. But if you're looking for a chip for a smart light bulb, that needs to be sub 50 cents.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm also curious because wasn't Silicon Labs the only company that was making Matter certified chips or chips for Matter certified devices, but now that's been opened?
Not exactly. So Silicon Labs has been a huge champion, but NXP has actually also produced Matter certified silicon. I don't know who was first. I can't recall. I'm not going to put my foot in that because maybe it was the first Bluetooth Zigbee integrate. When we talk to chip companies about the first, you really got to drill down because they're it's the first gigahertz class processor that has all three radios that are integrated with an NPU for AI. And you're like,
one little tweak and it's the first. Yeah. So when I think of NXP, I think of RFID chips. I'm sure they make a bunch. They have a wide portfolio, but I've always known them, or at least first knew them as a RFID chip maker, which kind of leads us into our next story.
RFID?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about it. That was so smooth, and I kind of just messed it up. Sorry.
You missed it.
I did.
Yeah.
It was so subtle. Oh, well. This is from NRF. The National Retail Foundation's conference was, 2 weeks ago. And I wasn't there because I had just gotten back from CES. I kind of wanted to be there. I feel bad about it now because Lowe's was showing off a way to help prevent retail theft of power tools. And power tool theft is a big deal. Retail theft overall has become a huge deal during the pandemic, with people just loading up carts and walking out the store, apparently, because it's organized crime going after these things and you don't want to have your employees get shot. That's a bad look and just generally bad. So Lowe's has shown this off. They are not using it in stores, but it's an RFID system where the power tool itself it's delivered to the store locked. And the chip inside, and there's a chip, an RFID scanner that basically, when the item is purchased, it is scanned by a cashier, which then renders the power tool operable, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's an activation method. And I mean, going off for power tools, and it is proof of concept right now, but you could put this in anything that can be electronically activated or deactivated.
Yeah. So not clothing, but a smartphone, a lamp, I don't know, whatever else. I'm a little unclear as to how it all works. I'm hoping to learn a lot more. I reached out to Lowe's and some RFID folks because it feels like there's got to be a connectivity element aside from RFID, but I could be wrong. Because I should also say it, they're also going to store who activated or where it was activated on the blockchain. So if it shows up in a pawn shop, you could find out how to get it back to not necessarily the owner, but I guess the store.
Yeah, they can't remotely activate or deactivate these things. It's all done at the store.
So there may not be as much internet there, but it is pretty savvy. So I thought it was...
Yeah.
I can't wait to see how thieves...
try and get around that.
I guess they could buy their own RFID gun. We'll see. All right.
Sure.
But along the lines of this, plus the NRF angle, the Wall Street Journal has a really good story about bandwidth challenges limiting grocery chains' technology initiatives. So this is grocery chains in particular, are putting in automated self-checkouts, camera systems that can identify, like the Amazon Go kind of style, no checkouts, where they identify the food that is in the store. When a customer picks it up, they charge it immediately to their account, that sort of thing. It requires a lot of bandwidth. Apparently, grocery stores don't have that. So we're looking at a wholesale upgrade of technology at retail locations.
They probably had enough bandwidth to do online payment processing is about it.
Yeah. And some of this, what Lowe's is doing probably doesn't need a lot of bandwidth because it's small bits of data. The activation isn't really a big deal. But even things like managing, we talked about with ambient computing and electronic shelf tags, that is not a lot of bandwidth if you do all the operating in the cloud and just send the data down to the system, but that image recognition type stuff is. And that's an issue for these companies. And apparently it wasn't an issue when they selected where they were going to do the stores. Some of them are located in broadband black holes. Personally, I am very excited about this because as we get industry saying, I need more bandwidth here, that's going to drive telecom companies to actually expand their operations in places where maybe they haven't before because they'll have a customer who's willing to pay for that. So I'm excited about this. I think it'll be good for especially grocery stores located in low income areas. That could be really great for them. So yay. Let's talk about Industry 5.0. Woo. I know. You're like...
I lost track of what we're up to.
So Industry 4.0 has been a thing. I've started to see, I think I made a sarcastic little news item a couple newsletters ago, but what people are saying, Industry 5.0 is basically Industry 4.0 plus a social conscience. I'm not kidding. It's the idea that we're going to use digitization not just for ROI and profits, but also for sustainability metrics. I'm just going to give still a big shrug, but a Swiss venture capital firm called Momenta has launched a $100 million fund for any Industry 5.0 tech in Europe. It's going to be also backed by the EU, the European Commission. And the idea is, again, to focus on using digital tech that's being deployed or already deployed in factories for sustainability efforts. They'll be investing in the UK, US, and Canada. So, yay. It's kind of, I don't know.
It's a feel-good story.
But it is money. So,
Yeah, no, I agree.
this is super quick news bits. Schlage, they have a new smart lock. It's a Schlage Encode Smart Wi-Fi lever lock, and it's designed for doors that don't have a deadbolt. It's just the single hole. That's really what it is. Yale also has a smart lever lock, and they have one that works with HomeKit. Lockly has an option. This is basically so if you want to lock something and put a key code on it, but like my garage door. Oh no, my garage door.
Yeah, an interior door.
I was like, well, yeah, my garage door does have a deadbolt, even though it's an interior door. But there are doors. Now you have another option.
Yeah, maybe they have valuables in a particular room and they want to secure that room, and they can pay $310 to do that.
A lot. It is a Wi-Fi lock.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
That's why I mentioned the price, because it's a lot.
Yeah, I'm really eager for these Matter smart home locks because they'll work over a cheaper radio, hopefully. And maybe we'll see prices go down. Maybe not. All right. Generac, which bought Ecobee back in November 2021 for $650 million, I believe it was. A lot of money. They have now said, we have now integrated our entire line of Wi-Fi and cellular home standby generators with the Ecobee smart thermostats, letting you have a single home energy hub management system. They will do this. I'm sorry. It is not actually done yet.
Right. They will soon integrate.
Yes. But you're going to have it on your app. If you have both of these devices, you will be able to do it in your Mobile Link app. You can choose to tie them together.
I see what they're going for when they say they're creating a single energy management hub for the home, but
It's not really, because you're not going to run your AC. Well, you might. If you have a substantial enough generator, you can run your AC or
sure.
heat.
It's just the generators typically there for backup power. So to me, a single energy management hub would also include power from the grid and managing that. But maybe they've got more plans for that.
I'm sure they do.
I'm sure they do too.
Everybody has these plans. We're going to actually.
If not, they do now.
Yeah, we're going to have a guest actually, not this week, but next week, I think, talking about this single home energy management. So, yay. Okay. And then if you are, can you sleep? I was like, can you sleep at night, Kevin? And I'm like, yeah, you live in the middle of nowhere. You totally can.
Correct. But if I lived like in New York City, it would be very different for me, I have a feeling.
Yes. But New York is opening up a pilot program to measure decibel and noise levels around the streets so people can sleep. So
yeah,
this is designed, this actually mimics, and I will say when I was in Paris over the summer, I was like, dang, this city has a lot of motorbikes going around at like 2 a.m. That's what this is designed to deal with. This is using sound meters to identify cars that are extra loud and motorbikes that are emitting an illegal amount of noise.
And considering how many people lean on the horn in New York City, which they have signs everywhere saying no honking, but this will actually put some teeth behind those signs.
Yes.
You're just going to get dinged. You're going to get fined through these new devices that determine you were the honker.
You were the loud person. Now, this is during certain times of day. You can honk during the day. So these are going to record the license plates of people when they are zipping through the city making the noise. The idea being that because this is looking at time-centric things, that fewer people will be around to confuse the noise sensors. And I will also say, I think decibel sensors are great for certain areas. Like this is a great application for it. I also feel like apartment buildings probably should have decibel sensors. Like if you're going to do a smart apartment building, having noise meters casually located around is a great way to deal with noise complaints, basically, and help litigate those so they're not just he said, she said kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also am getting pitches from companies talking about using decibel meters as a proxy for things like productivity. I am raising a big eyebrow at that correlation.
No.
But it does indicate to me that, hey, it's possible that decibel meters are going to be like the hotness for 2023 when it comes to sensors. So that's just a little prediction I'm making right now. Okay, Kevin.
Let's talk hotness in Matter.
Yeah, let's talk smart plugs and hotness. And you tested the terribly named device.
I would agree. The TP-Link Tapo P125, presumably for Matter. That is a smart plug. It's the newest one from TP-Link in their Tapo line. It is $19.99, although they're having a launch sale for $15.99, just so folks are aware. We got a review unit. We did not buy this, and my experience with this was very different from the Eve Smart Energy plug that I upgraded firmware to in November to support Matter. And I mean that in a good way because, as I said in my review, the setup process was essentially boring. And that is awesome because that's part of what Matter should be helping with. It should help with that. It should help with bridging different voice assistants to use your devices. It does all that. So I set up and reset up this device several times. I did it in HomeKit, I did it with the Google Home app, and I did it with the TP-Link Tapo mobile app. And no matter how I did it, it worked and connected to my network, which is interesting because it is a 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi radio inside this smart plug. But I did not have any issues on my Eero Pro 6 setup. I used a QR code, the Matter QR code for Apple and Google when I set this up. The current Tapo mobile app does not use that. It just scans for devices on your network and finds them. But once I had it set up in any way of those methods, I could control it through my Apple devices, my HomePods, my Google Nest Hub, my Google phone. It's beautiful. The voice assistants, I don't want to say their names. I could use either one that's in my house and it just works. So really awesome. I really do like this plug. I like how it's designed. It is nice and small. It has a power button, so you can manually turn it on and off. It does not take up too much space, so you can have two of these in a dual outlet. The only thing I will say for anybody who is thinking about buying this, it does not have any smart energy management data or anything like that. You only get every other smart feature, basically. Automations. I tested automations. It's working fine. In fact, I tested it with a Eve Smart Motion sensor and had the power come on to the Tapo unit when the Eve saw motion. All perfectly fine. Just no data. So if you need that, this is not it. If you don't, this is great.
Again, I'm like, oh, do I want to replace my smart plugs? Not really. And this gets me into this idea of basically, should I convert my home to Matter or not? I mean, okay, I will because that's my job. But
right.
Like if you have like existing smart home outlets, do you need to convert them? If it works for you, probably not. I would wait actually another year or two just to see like how far this goes and how well things get integrated. Like I don't feel like there's compelling reasons to like ditch your smart plug if you don't.
No. I would agree.
I wouldn't replace. But if you're like, oh, I need a new smart plug for, my coffee machine, go ahead, get it.
I agree with everything you said. The only other scenario I would consider replacing is if I wanted to have the flexibility to switch platforms on a whim. Because with Matter, you can switch over to or use multiple. Like I have both Google smart speakers and Apple smart speakers in my home. Depending on the room I'm in, one will be there versus another. So if you want that flexibility, okay. But I would think most people don't need to run out and get Matter smart plugs. No.
Okay. Well, if you do, $20. Not terrible. It is more expensive than the $5 Amazon smart plug that I'm sure is running around your Amazon recommendations like mine are. But
it's a nice plug.
It's a nice plug and it has Matter. Yay. All right. Well, that concludes the news segment of the show, but now it's time for the part of the show where we talk to you. That's right. It's the Internet of Things podcast hotline, which is sponsored by Kenza. Create amazing IoT solutions with the Akenza low-code IoT platform. You can try it for free today at akenza.io. That's AKENZA.io. And it is the end of the month, which means it's time to announce our winner of the small, cute nanoleaf triangles. And our winner this month is Sam. Congratulations, Sam. I will be reaching out to you to let you know about it. And I can tell that you love having a smart home because you have a lot of gear in your home. So this should be fun for you. All right. This month, for the month of February, I don't know what we're going to offer you yet. Give us another week. We'll come back with something I think really good. I'm kind of feeling the smart light bulbs. Y'all really seem to like those, but I also want to throw out some other good fun devices in there. So we'll see. But our question for this week is, again, related to one of our stories we talked about already. It's from Marianne. Let's hear it.
Hi, this is Marianne in Los Angeles. I have a question about video doorbells. We're thinking about buying one in the next few months. I know you've talked about them in the past, but I was curious what your thoughts are on the options that are currently available. What's the best thing for your buck, things we should consider, things like that. We have both Amazon and Google Assistants. We have some Wyze cameras and a couple of different smart lighting systems. We'll probably be accessing the video feed most often when we're away from the house and on our phones, so latency of the video feed is something that we're concerned about. We also know we'll likely be paying a subscription fee for access to the video, but we'd rather not pay an arm and a leg if possible for that access. Any thoughts on things we should consider are much appreciated. And thanks for all the work you do putting together the podcast and the newsletter. They're both really informative.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of options. I think it's safe to, we researched all the different options, not all of them, but the ones we would probably...
The big ones.
The
ones that we're familiar with and have used.
We did come up with Eufy on that list, but I don't know. Do we want to keep it on there?
I'm going to keep it on. We know where it's at. I mean, I did not uninstall my Eufy doorbell based on all of this.
Right.
Knowing everything, I'm like, I still feel okay because it is a doorbell camera.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to doorbells, you really have to, there's a lot of software features in there. The hardware is mostly the same. So, you're looking at a 1080p for the most part camera, two-way audio, usually infrared so you can see better in the dark. There's field of view. There's things like package detection. Most things, like if you're talking about true package detection, you're going to be talking about a subscription. You said you were fine paying for a subscription. You also mentioned that lighting systems will be accessing the video feed most often when we're away from our phone. So latency of the video feed is something we're concerned about. The video feed itself is not going to be super accessible. You mentioned you have both Amazon and Google. The fastest and most automated way to do the video feed is going to be using either a Google doorbell to a Google display or a Ring doorbell to an Amazon display. But if you're just talking about a notification from those devices to a lighting system to turn on the lights, that doesn't require your video feed. That just requires the ability to access that notification, which is a little bit different.
Right. Those are generally pretty quick. And we bring this up because if you're going to access the video feed, you'll notice we don't have Wyze cameras on this list because personally, I've had nothing but latency issues when I want to view them on, say, my Google Nest Hub. So that wouldn't meet your need if that's what you're looking for.
So if you want something that just gives a notification, but so it might work with Amazon or Google's routines to set off a light, because also video doorbells are not going to be part of the Matter standard anytime soon because it has a video component and those just aren't. So if you're just talking about a motion sensing event getting triggered from the doorbell and then triggering a light to go on at your porch, you're going to want to look for something, just pick one place to do that, right? So pick either Google or Amazon, and then you're going to want to optimize for that because some video doorbells don't provide that motion sensing trigger out to a lighting system, for example. Because you have both, I think Ring is probably a decent option for you because they have a wide range of prices and features. And their subscription package is so much cheaper than with the Nest. So I would look at Ring. The cheapest video doorbell is $100. The more expensive is $260 something. So, you'll have to ask yourself, are you okay with Amazon having access to your video doorbell feed? Do you want package alerts? That's going to dictate somewhere in that range of pricing. They have a super basic one for $40. I think you should go at least one up from that just to get package alerts and that sort of thing. The Nest camera the doorbell camera is $180, but the subscription is $60 a year, which is a lot. So you
have a choice of wired or wireless video doorbells there for the same price right now. They're going to work well with your Google stuff for sure.
Arlo cameras are pretty good. I have the cameras. I don't have the doorbell, but the doorbell is recommended, and they have an integration with your Google device. The doorbell starts at $80 and they have a $5 monthly subscription fee for one camera. And you can get motion alerts from your Arlo doorbell to your Google Home system. So that motion alert could trigger a light.
And that gets you back to your $60 a year, essentially, as well, for the subscription. So you're going to pay. But I think that's all good advice. Stick with the brand or ecosystem that you want this to work with, because you're going to have the least latency and probably the most features in the subscription that you can get for your system that are going to work well. I know Marianne doesn't have HomeKit. I'm just going to mention this, that there are several good HomeKit secure video cameras for people who have HomeKit. I use the Logitech CircleView video doorbell. It was not cheap. I mean, it's just a tad over $200, but the subscription fees for Apple's Secure or HomeKit Secure Video is really cheap. For 99 cents a month, you can have one camera. $36 a year gets you support for up to 5 cameras, and all that's encrypted and so on. So if you're looking at the subscription fees, they're generally lower as a result of that. But again, this is for other people, not for Marianne.
Yes, unless you have an iPhone, and then you could set up your HomeKit thing to turn on your lights with your thing. But that's just us being crazy. And I mentioned Eufy because I have this. Eufy doesn't support motion detection notifications with Amazon Echo. So just so you know, I can turn on my video doorbell on my Echo Show device and see things. There is high latency, but I can't use the motion detections to turn on anything from Madam A, and I can't use it for Google either to trigger things.
Yeah, the benefit to that particular doorbell is that it has 16 gigabytes of onboard storage inside. It's not removable. It's not an SD card. It's onboard storage, so it's all local.
Yeah. So your use case, that's not a great doorbell for you. Okay. So if you have a question or you just want to be entered to win the mystery prize for February, you can give us a call at 512-623-7424 and ask us your question. We might give you an answer you want to hear or don't want to hear on the show. That concludes this part of the show. So stay tuned for our guest, Kevin Fu. We're going to be talking about medical device security and what is now going to become required in the United States. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Kevin Fu, who is a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Northeastern University. Hello, Kevin. How are you today?
Oh, doing just fine. Thanks for having me, Stacey.
I am really excited. I have read your papers and watched your work for probably the entire time I've had this show. You've done some great work hacking sensors. You were at the FDA thinking about cybersecurity for medical devices. And I'm just really honored. So thank you. So let's get started and talk about where your interest in sensing and medical devices comes from.
Sure. Well, so there's the sensing is interesting to me from a physics standpoint. There's just some really interesting academic research problems on how to protect the analog semiconductors from an adversary being able to not eavesdrop, but do something much more interesting, and that's inject false information into automated systems, autonomous systems. And that's very related to medical devices, because medical devices are becoming more and more autonomous. There are plenty of closed-loop medical devices that do treatment and diagnosis. And on the medical side, I got involved with that in the early 1990s, working in a small community hospital and observing just the challenges as the information technology team was rolling out new security and access control technologies, and watching how it really interfered with the clinical workflow. It was clear to me that this was an area needing a lot of attention. And so I didn't realize it would take 20, 30 years of effort, but here I am today still working on problems of healthcare cybersecurity.
Well, you know, cybersecurity is never a solved problem. And I could argue that healthcare is probably very similar. So let's talk about cybersecurity regulation today in the US, because you just informed me before this that the Patch Act, which was proposed in March of last year. This was all about helping the FDA make sure that devices don't go out into the market insecure. It required some certification ahead of time. I think there were some other elements in there in terms of once it's in the market, you have to be able to monitor it and address issues. And it was actually passed as part of the big end of year budget omnibus bill, which came as a surprise to me. So I was really excited. Can you talk to people a bit about the Patch Act and how that will impact medical device security going forward?
Sure. Let me get a little background here, though, on two things, the Patch Act and also how medical devices legally reach the U.S. marketplace. So the Patch Act was a bill introduced in the House and Senate that made clear that self-regulation was not working for protecting the security of medical devices, and it ought to be required rather than simply recommended or optional. So the Patch Act was proposing legislation to become part of federal statute, federal law, requiring things like software bill of materials, cybersecurity review by the FDA, threat modeling, things of that nature. To a cybersecurity person would just be, well, of course you do that. But it was far from universal. And so this law was proposing to make it required. At the same time, FDA, there's no concept of a certification process for a medical device. Instead, they have something called a clearance. And sometimes for high-risk devices, they have something called an approval process. These are pre-market review. The companies will submit design documentation arguing for the safety and effectiveness of the device and the risk management. And then FDA makes a decision on that for whether to clear it or approve it for the U.S. marketplace, at which point it can be sold. There are other regulatory pathways, but those are the two that most people think about. Now, what was interesting is in late December, Congress in the United States passed something called the Omnibus Bill. This is omnibus, Latin meaning everything. It was a 4,000-page bill, but inside of it, there were 3 or 4 very interesting pages that largely resembled the Patch Act. And the bill was passed. It had become law. And FDA has already publicly stated in other news reports that they're studying this law to figure out what it means in terms of changes they will be making in their regulatory process. And we've been put on notice to keep our eyes out in the coming months as FDA figures out how it's going to interpret this law. So it's not exactly the same as the Patch Act, but it's pretty close. So you'll see requirements for a software bill of materials for devices that can connect to the internet and other sort of security controls. So it does require now by law that the manufacturers seek FDA's cybersecurity engineering review process. So it's no longer optional, it's no longer just recommended, but it's required by statute, it's required by federal law. So as far as I know, this is the first marketplace in the United States that requires cybersecurity engineering review before a product can be sold. I'm certainly aware of other markets where there's post-market approaches known as litigation in the courtrooms. The Federal Trade Commission may, after the fact, issue fines and so on and so forth. But this is the first case I'm aware of where a federal law requires essentially pre-market review.
Yeah. And I know there's really some very interesting things at various federal agencies around cybersecurity. A lot of them are recommendations or asking for companies who sell into those markets to outline their security practices. But that's about it. There's not an audit function built in. They could just ignore it, I guess, or lie, and no one will know. So this does seem pretty noteworthy. I would also love for you to explain to people how conservative the medical device industry is, not just on the regulation side, but the practitioners. Because I know for the longest time when I talked to companies selling medical devices, they'd be like, well, we can't update our software. The FDA would never allow us. We'd have to go through a certification process again or approvals process again. And the FDA has been very clear about that is not true. But it's a very conservative industry. And I don't think people understand why or what that means for these efforts.
So I think it's going to be, please eat your vegetables. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and it can be difficult to parse the regulations, which is why I always say, well, don't just do hearsay, go to the source. And there's an FDA landing page. If you just search for FDA cybersecurity and medical devices, you can find every single one of the consensus standards, guidance documents. Guidance documents are effectively what FDA expects a manufacturer to do to protect cybersecurity. And right smack in the middle of that page is we expect you to provide timely software updates and patches to keep these devices safe and effective. So of course you'll hear from time to time a sales engineer misinforming a healthcare delivery organization. Again, as you point out, this falsehood, this myth of, we can't provide updates because of some, FDA regulations that blah, 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 which of course is completely false. But that can sound pretty scary to an HDO when it's coming from a manufacturer. So not only has FDA been saying that's false and saying, no, you're actually supposed to provide updates, but now it's required by law. So before, it was simply FDA policy saying, please provide updates, we expect it. Now, with the law, it's federally required.
And so what is the FDA looking for and I know y'all are still analyzing this, but what are the best practices that I guess you would recommend, and then what is actually likely to happen here ahead of putting a medical device on the market? What are they looking for?
Well, let me just preface this with, I do not speak for the FDA. I'm not a spokesperson for the FDA, but I have my own personal opinions. My own personal opinions is that we're going to see some of the practices that have been merely recommended are going to become, this is what we are going to interpret for the federal law requirement. I also think it's actually going to speed up the cybersecurity review process because there's quite a bit of bureaucracy in deciding, hey, do we need to look at a cybersecurity review for a particular device? But now there's no question. You do, and likely I would say, if it were up to me, I would probably be doing it from a risk-based approach of just the level of detail, where a pacemaker or a defibrillator, of course, is going to receive a lot more scrutiny than a tongue depressor, Bluetooth tongue depressor, something like that. The amount of risk analysis is always going to be, in my view, best proportional to the likely amount of risk. So that's my sort of really high-level crystal ball on what's going to happen. But I think it's all great because, sure, there's going to be a transition time period where we're sort of moving to a new system as a marketplace. But I actually think this is going to speed things up. This is going to help the marketplace overall. And ultimately, it means patients are going to get the devices they deserve that are not only safe and effective, but have cybersecurity properties such that, look, cybersecurity risks are endemic. We all know that. They're here to stay. They're ransomware groups, other sorts of nation state and organized crime. They're not going away. These devices need to remain secure even if the network is compromised by an adversary. And I know it's possible. We teach how to do that in the university. I've seen it done before in medical devices. So I'm confident it can be done. And now we can just move forward in a much more deliberate manner, much more directly addressing the cybersecurity questions.
And how does this change we'll start with the longevity of a device. I'm thinking about a pacemaker, things like that. If you add connectivity to it, if you add software to it, you're going to have to monitor that for a certain amount of time. What does that mean?
Well, so you bring up the word legacy, and that actually has a very special meaning in the medical device community. So much so that the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, which is this forum that meets every 2 weeks of all the major regulatory agencies in the world, they've actually created a document on what does it mean, what is a legacy device, whose responsibility is it at what point in time, when does the responsibility shift from a purchaser, in other words, a healthcare delivery organization like a hospital, when does it shift to an HDO from a manufacturer? It also brings up all sorts of squirrely questions like, so if you're running this medical device on an operating system and that operating system goes out of support, does that mean it's now a legacy device? From my personal point of view, a legacy device is one that is not only insecure today, but it's insecurable tomorrow. And that means there's a design flaw baked in that makes it really hard or impossible to keep it secure or provide patches and updates.
Sure. Like a default or hard-coded password, maybe it doesn't get over-the-air updates. We're familiar with those. So then what does that mean?
Yeah. So what it means is, in my hopes, is that so first of all, everything becomes a legacy device not an insecurable device, but everything has legacy on day one. They're going to be baked in issues. The difference between a good and a less good device is one planned ahead for it. And so my hopes is that products, as they're being released now in the future, are going to assume this life cycle of, yes, having to provide updates, having to be agile, because the threat models are going to change over the lifetime of the device. If you're building your device for ransomware 1.0 protection, it's not going to help you against ransomware 3.0 in 10 years. You might ask, well, what's an example of a legacy device? Well, the classic one is an MRI machine. Sometimes a hospital will call this the magnet. These are extremely expensive capital expenditures. And what that means in layperson's terms is, hey, you spent a lot of money. You got to make sure you can amortize the cost over a decade or two, such that the hospital can even afford to buy it. And so a real challenge is if you have equipment out there 10 or 20 years, it used to be that the mechanical breakdown would cause the end of life for that component. But nowadays, it's the software. The first thing to sort of stop providing what it's designed to do and ensure essential clinical performance is the software.
And I ask this for anytime I have someone from a hospital or a cybersecurity firm on the show. What do we do with some of these legacy devices, especially in budget-constrained places like rural hospitals? I'll just ask you, because you seem smart. What do you think we should do?
Well, I'll just say, look, it's a real challenge. I feel for the small rural hospitals and the clinics that some even some medium-sized hospitals don't have an IT department. They can't afford it. They might outsource it. It can be much harder to have that security posture. Personally, I think there ought to be some way to sort of help some of the smaller groups. There's been discussions in some of the medical device security forums of should there be some kind of poverty level of security, some minimum security, almost like universal health care. It's not clear how that's going to happen, but it's clearly a big problem. And there are a large number of small hospitals and clinics in the United States. So this is a significant problem as it affects just the population of the country overall.
That is a challenge. Let's walk back from cybersecurity and talk about AI for a moment on these medical devices. So especially when we're looking at things like closed loop medical devices, maybe it's continuous glucose monitoring is a very popular one. When we look at some of the algorithms on there, do we have any rules in place to help, audit the algorithms or make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do?
Well, I'll just look, algorithms are complicated, and some algorithms come with large data sets, training data sets. Machine learning in particular uses quite a bit of training data. And the FDA has published a draft document that talks about sort of two different kinds of AI or machine learning. There's static AI and there's dynamic AI. So static would be, you teach the software, for instance, how to diagnose, why don't we just say something like skin cancer. A dynamic algorithm might be one that says, okay, we'll recognize skin cancer, but over time we'll start using all the patient data that we've been scanning to improve our algorithms. Now, at first glance, this might seem like a great idea, but the problem is we have a very difficult time understanding safety if we're going to be continuously modifying how it does diagnosis. This is not a human being with common sense, it's an algorithm, and algorithms don't always follow what makes sense, especially if bad data goes in. We have the phrase in computer science, garbage in, garbage out. Or heaven forbid, if an adversary cleverly injects false information into a training set, suddenly this device may no longer be safe or effective. So I would say the regulatory community has high confidence in its ability for ensuring the safety and effectiveness review of static AI or machine learning, where there's a training set that's established. But I think the jury's still out on how can we do this for things that are learning over time.
That's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted that silver bullet. All right. And as we add broadly connectivity, intelligence to medical devices, we talked about the cybersecurity elements, having this sort of review, having ongoing software updates. How does this change the business of producing and selling a medical device?
Just to give you a reality check, hand washing for ensuring clinical safety was effectively invented in the 1840s, and still the leading cause of death in hospitals is infection, over 170 years later. So when we talk about solving the cybersecurity problem, we have to keep in context of, look, this is not a Silicon Valley kind of can change tonight. These things can take centuries to solve. And so it really boils down to becoming, how do we manage the problem? We're not going to drive the risk to zero, nor would we want to, because if we drove the risk to zero, we probably wouldn't have devices. But how can we get these to a level of tolerable risk such that the outcomes are going to be better? So I think what it's going to look like over time, and when I say over time, this is years, is that security is just going to be part of the regular product development lifecycle workflow. We saw this happen at some of the early software companies like Microsoft in the early 2000s, declared such a big crisis with Windows 95 that they had all of their engineers focusing on security for a year to really get their processes in place and lock down their software to be much more resilient to the threats out there. I predict that, again, there's going to be a transition period, I think, in any marketplace. But it's clear that security problems are endemic. It's no longer hackers in hoodies in their basements just sort of fooling around and having fun. These are economically motivated, politically motivated adversaries. They even have great HR teams. So in some sense, it's a business, but their business is to cause cybersecurity problems. Again, it's going to become a normal part of the engineering process to have cybersecurity in there.
Got it. Yes, I agree with you. And I hope it does, because yes, that's going to cost more. It is going to change things, but we really need it to happen. So, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the show this week.
You're welcome, Stacy.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday, and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening, and please subscribe.